I am joined today by my colleagues Cheyenne Cohn-Pastel, who is a program officer in the Cultural Investment Portfolio team, and my colleague Charles Baldwin, who's a program officer who oversees the Universal Participation Initiative. So thank you both to Cheyenne and Charles for supporting me today. Charles and Cheyenne are going to be managing the Q&A function of this session. So when you have questions, please type them into the Q&A, not into the chat. And they will either be able to answer your question directly or they will step in and remind me to answer it. I'm going to ask you if you can not just put in commentary on the process, but really keep it focused on questions, trying to learn what you need to know to be submitting a successful application. Also, as I get through each section, so I'm going to talk about organizational eligibility, ask questions about whether or not your organization is eligible. When I talk about project eligibility, ask questions related to that. It'll really help all of us keep focused and answer questions in a sort of organized fashion. So, and I will pause at the end of each of those to give you a second to voice any questions or type any questions. Our agenda for today. Like I said, it's the Cultural Investment Portfolio of the Mass Cultural Council. I'm going to give you an overview of what this program is and then really get into the projects program specifically. A fair number of you might have applied to this program in the past. We've made some pretty substantial changes this year. I'm going to highlight what those changes are without getting into the details of them, because I'll get into the details when we get to those specific sections. I'm going to talk about what kind of organization you have to have in order to be eligible for this program. Then I'm going to talk about what makes a project eligible. Then the application and the review process, so you'll know how we're going to be handling this. And finally, tips and suggestions on submitting an effective application. And just a reminder that this webinar, which we really hope is helpful to you, and we will be recording it and we'll be putting it on our website, this is not a replacement for reviewing the guidelines. So please take a look at the guidelines and the FAQ as well. And we wish you the very best of luck. So the Cultural Investment Portfolio, like I said, that is the organizational support program of the Mass Cultural Council, separate from our Creative Youth Development team or our Artists Department or the Cultural Facilities Fund or the local Cultural Council program. So all different programs of the Mass Cultural Council. Many of you might be familiar with the local Cultural Council program, which has local cultural councils in every single city and town in Massachusetts, re-granting locally. This program, Mass Cultural Council programs, grant statewide. So applicants will come from all over the state to apply to this program. The portfolio consists of three sections. First of all is the portfolio itself, where we award formula-funded grants to a set of organizations. Currently 311 organizations that have ongoing unrestricted operating support, and those grants range from $4,500 to $60,000, depending on the size of the budget of the organization. We also have gateway grantees, and the gateway program is for organizations that want to move into the portfolio. So basically it's the on-ramp to get into the portfolio. Those organizations get a 2-year grant of $3,500 a year. The next application to that is going to be probably next January. So January of 2022. And then finally, this program, project grantees. And anybody who's looking at the numbers there sees already one of our changes. So project grants are $1,000 and $2,500. In the past, they were just $2,500. And this year we've decided to institute additional grants for $1,000. cultural investment portfolio also includes a wide range of services. We do workshops, we do seminars. We just launched a really large program of workshops yesterday with a session on boards in times of COVID, and doing another one tomorrow. If you go to the Mass Cultural Council website, you can find all of these services. You do not have to be a current grantee of the Mass Cultural Council to apply, to sign up for any of those sessions. So we encourage you to take a look, see what feels useful to you. We're really interested in supporting all of our organizations. Like I said, whether or not you're a current grantee, these programs are open to you. And in fiscal 21, we have awarded, or we are prepared to award, $6.2 million in grants, and that includes this projects category. So, major changes from previous years. Like I've already called out, in the past, we only did grants of $2,500. This year, because we know that so many organizations, the project budgets are smaller because they're not paying for physical spaces. Maybe they're not spending money on production values. This year, we decided to make grants available at the $1,000 level as well. And I'm going to get into that in more detail when I talk through that part of the guidelines, but just to let you know, grants at 2 levels. Some changes to eligibility requirements for applicants. So in the past, you had to have a minimum budget size for your organization to be eligible to apply to this program. We have gotten rid of that requirement. Also, we used to say that the project that you applied for could not be the entire activity of your organization. So if you were an organization that only did one thing a year, let's say a large festival, you would by definition not be eligible because the festival would be the entire activity of your organization. And we decided that was not a valuable distinction, and we've gotten rid of that. And then finally, in the past, all of the applications have been for public programming, activities, events, workshops, educational programs available to the general public. This year, we are testing something, which is that organizations that are fully cultural have the additional option of being able to apply for an organization investment grant. And when I get to that portion of the guidelines, I will get into that in more detail. It is a new experience, a new project for us, and we hope it will be useful to organizations. And again, this is our response to the fact that organizations are facing so many challenges in this time that are different from challenges in the past. One thing I'm going to say right off the bat, the question I've been getting most frequently in emails since this application launched is, are the dates correct? Do we really mean last June until next June? And yes, we really do mean that. This is a program that typically would have run last spring, an application deadline of last May for projects starting last June. But because the world was so unsettled at that point, we had no idea what our budget was. People had no idea when they might be able to reopen or do any kind of programming. It didn't seem like it would be helpful to anybody to launch a grant program in the middle of that. So we paused, we waited until our budget was approved by the legislature, which happened in December. So we've launched this program now. But we are allowing you to look back to last June to see if you have a project, even if it's already completed, that you want to apply for support for. So here we are with the projects program. Again, this is support for a specific project. You're going to have to describe the project that you are doing. It's not a general operating support grant. Grants at 2 levels, $2,500 or $1,000. And you select that. It's based on the budget size of the project that you are applying for. You may apply to this program annually. So if you got a grant last year, you can apply again this year. You can continue to apply multiple years. You can do the same program every year. This might be your annual production of Christmas Carol, and you apply for it every year, and that's okay. This program is not for individuals. If you are not with an organization, you are not eligible to apply for this program. Also, and this is going to pop up again, if you are currently getting either a gateway grant or a portfolio grant, our formula funded grants, you are not eligible for this program. So within the cultural investment portfolio activities, where we have 3 grant programs, projects, gateway, and portfolio, you may only receive 1.
Sarah?
And, yes, hello.
Hi, it's Cheyenne. With this longer eligible project window of June 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021, could someone apply for 2 different projects for this one cycle?
Great question. You may only submit 1 application, and it should be for 1 project. So I guess the answer would be no. The applications are due March 2nd, 2021. That's basically a month from now, minus a day. The application program will shut down at 11:59 p.m. That should say p.m. Eastern time. So at 1 second till midnight, this program will shut down. And if you have missed the deadline, if you do not submit your application by that moment, you will not be eligible. There is no reconsideration of that. So who may apply for a project grant? This is another area where we do things a little bit differently in this program. Any Massachusetts recognized 501c3 organization may apply for a project grant. So you don't have to be an arts and culture organization. You could be, for example, a social service organization that does some cultural programming. You could be a YMCA or a Boys and Girls Club that does dance classes. So a huge variety of organizations and activities. As long as you have your 501c3 status and you are appropriately registered in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you may apply. Secondly, you may be an agency or a department under federal, state, or local government. For example, you might be the Council on Aging that is a part of the town government, and you may apply to this program. That would also include if you are a local cultural council, you may apply to this program. Applicants that are using a fiscal agent, and that's in the guidelines, and I'll get to you a little bit more about that, but a fiscal agent, if you do not have your own 501c3 status, a fiscal agent acts to handle the contract for you. They receive the funds and they are committing to the fact that your program is eligible and is meets the legal requirements. The organizations that use a fiscal agent are either unincorporated associations that have been doing programming, even though they do not have incorporated status, or they are currently incorporated but do not yet have their 501c3. So you cannot be a for-profit organization using a fiscal agent in this. Again, if you have received a project grant in the past, you may apply again. But if you have not finished your fiscal 20 project, you have to do that before you can apply to this program. So finish that up, submit your final report by March 2nd. This is particularly an issue for organizations that had a project grant last year and the project had to be postponed or redefined because of the pandemic. And then finally, like I said, not portfolio or gateway grantees and not individuals. And I'm going to pause for a second to see if we have any questions about this. And I do see one question I'll answer. An organization that's a 501c3 that's headquartered in another state has to be registered in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as a foreign corporation. So we do have some corporations that have that status. That's okay, but you do have to register with the Secretary of the Commonwealth, and that registration has to be complete by March 2nd. What will happen is on March 3rd, we will take a list of all of the organizations that have applied to this program, and your tax ID number will be run through a state system. If you are not eligible, we'll notify you, your application will not be reviewed. So that's, any other questions about eligibility for the actual organization before I get into eligibility for the project?
Hi, Sarah. This is Charles.
Hi, Charles.
Jumping in with a question about our local cultural councils districts. So a cultural district eligible for this grant program?
Yeah, if they do their own programming, absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you.
So they do have to have their own programming. They cannot apply to this for funds to re-grant, which is part of a eligibility I'll move on to. I see the question about the foreign corporations. You need to go to the Secretary of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts website and look up how to register. That is something that you're going to need to handle on your own. And there is a fee for doing that. So you'll have to balance whether or not that's an option for you. And honestly, if you are operating in Massachusetts, you're supposed to have done that already. Okay.
Sarah,
Yes.
there's the question specifically of if a fiscal sponsor is in New York, but the DBA is registered in Massachusetts.
That's okay. We have a fair number of organizations that have used Fractured Atlas, for example, as a fiscal agent. I believe Fractured Atlas is actually registered with the Secretary of the Commonwealth as a foreign corporation doing business in Massachusetts. So that is not a problem. So again, some continued eligibility. This does not fund startups doing your first project. You do have to have 2 years of cultural programming prior to this application. That's a question on the application, you'll check it off. Secondly, you have to match the amount of funds that we give you. So if we give you $1,000 for your project, you have to have $1,000 of funds from other sources. So in effect, the minimum budget size for any project that you can apply for is $2,000. $1,000 from this program and $1,000 from other sources. And I'll get into that in a little more detail. So projects with cash expenses ranging from $2,000 up to $4,999 can apply for a $1,000 grant. Once you hit $5,000, you can apply for a $2,500 grant. Any project with a budget of $5,000 or more may apply for the $2,500 grant. This does have to be cash expenses, not in kind. The application has a budget section. Your budget needs to break even. So you can't lose money. You can't show that you're planning to make money on this. The application itself, including this grant, has to break even. And if you think about it from the perspective of, assume for a moment that you submit to us a budget that loses money. We're going to wonder how you're paying the bills. Or you show a budget that's going to make a surplus. Well, then why do you need this grant? So your budget needs to break even. Now, obviously, we all know that everybody plans for project budgets, and then the real world happens, and maybe your project brings in more revenue than you expected, and you show a surplus. Congratulations to you. We think that's fabulous. Just can't be the written budget that you supply to this application. And again, a repeat that the project and its expenses take place between June 1st of 2020, so almost half a year, more than half a year ago, up through this coming June 30th. If you have a project that's happening in July or August of this year, you should wait and apply to the next cycle of this application, of this grant program. Like I said, this grant program normally accepts applications in the spring to start in that summer. Everything about this year has been unusual. But for this next cycle, we will hope to get back on our regular calendar, our regular schedule of work. Let's see. So that's some general questions about eligibility. I do see a question about scholarships. The scholarships you award are not eligible for your cash expenses. We're giving you money to do your work, not giving you our money so you can give it to someone else. Any other questions about the general concept of projects before I move on to the next step?
Yes, there's a question about unfinished projects. Say you do get a grant, but you don't finish by June 30th.
Well, I guess the question would be, why didn't you finish it? We're expecting that this is a project where you are expecting to finish it by June. We will ask you in the application what the date is that your project is going to be completed. So that would be a concern. If for some reason you aren't able to finish it, I can think of a great example. We had an organization that had a grant, and the conductor for the project broke her arm and obviously could not conduct. And they asked us if they could revise the program so that the conductor could wait until her arm had healed before they did the concert. That's the kind of thing that we review on a case-by-case basis. We consider what the reason is that you weren't able to finish the project. And depending on what the information is and how you plan on meeting the requirements of the contract, because this is a grant where we have a contract with you. The contract is for you to do this work. If your organization doesn't do the work, there needs to be a clear reason why not. Let's see. And we definitely have organizations that partner with other organizations. Your application should be for funds that go through your accounts because those are your cash expenses. This is a question we get a lot. You may also apply to local cultural councils for the exact same project or for other projects. This is not a concern for us at Mass Cultural Council that you've gotten support from the local cultural council. If anything, we think that's great because it shows that you have local support for your project. And you can also apply to the Mass Cultural Council's festivals program, which I believe if it hasn't launched already, it's going to launch in the next couple of days and is covering some overlapping dates. But you cannot use the festivals grant money to count for your match. That would be asking us to use our money to match our money. This year, we are specifically asking and requiring that you have a backup plan in place for remote program delivery if necessary. Certainly something we could not have foreseen in the past, but right now we think it is reasonable that you have a plan for how you would deliver this program remotely if that becomes a requirement. And we're hoping it won't become a requirement. We're not asking you for the details of your remote planning. We're just requiring that you have considered this and you've got it in your planning. And this isn't relevant this year, but in a year when we have both the gateway and project applications running sort of concurrently, you may apply for both, but you won't get both. You'll only get one, and you'll always get the one that's better for you. I do see a question about budgets. I'm going to wait and hold that until I actually talk about budgets, if you don't mind. So timeline. Project application deadline, again, and I can't say this often enough, March 2nd, 2021 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. And that's really important because there is no reconsideration. If you have not hit submit, and that always happens to somebody who has actually finished all the application and didn't hit submit, it's not going to be reviewed. And just a word of advice to you, when you hit submit, you will get an automated email from the computerized system. It looks like I'm always writing emails to you, but no, it's all automated through the system. It tells you that we have received your application. So if you don't receive that email telling you that we've received your application, it means we haven't received it yet. So be on the lookout for that. We are looking to turn this around really fast because we know how late this process has been. So we are hoping, we have every intention of notifying you around the second week of April, whether or not you have received these funds, this grant. And the project and its expenses must take place before June 30th of 2021. So we notify you the second week of April. Our goal is to get the contracts emailed out to your executive director before the end of April. You then have to sign the contract and return it to us by good old-fashioned mail. So although we could email the contract to you, we cannot accept the contract sent back to us by email. And the state system, because that is what we're working with, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts financial systems, sends out payments within 45 days of receiving your signed contract materials in the mail. There's a final report for this program. It's a pretty simple one. Basically, it asks you, did you do the project the way you said you were going to do it? What changed? What'd you learn from it? And then a final budget. That final report is due June 30th. If your project finishes on June 29th, we can do an extension for this. But if your project is happening in May, there's no reason why you shouldn't have this done by the end of June. And then again, project applications for fiscal 22, we expect those to launch in May or June of this year. And we reserve the right to change that if the world turns topsy-turvy again. So what can be funded? I see some questions about what can be funded or what kinds of projects. I'm going to hold those until I've gone through what can be funded, and then we can address questions about what kinds of things can be funded, because I might answer it for you now. So any organization that is eligible, any 501c3 organization, anyone working with a fiscal agent, any of these folks may apply for public programming in the arts, humanities, or interpretive sciences. And by interpretive sciences, we are talking about the kinds of organizations that interpret the natural world for the public. So environmental education, zoos, aquariums, watershed alliances, botanical gardens, all of those would fit in this category. Your project can be a one-time activity, such as a festival, or a theatrical production, or a concert, or it can be an activity that you repeat, every year. Like I said, that production of Christmas Carol that you do every year, you can apply for that again. It does not need to be a new project specifically designed to meet these guidelines. It does need to be a distinct aspect of your activities. So again, we're talking about a specific event, a single production, an exhibition, an educational seminar. It could be a series of related events, such as a lecture series where lectures happen every week for 2 months. It could be a set of art classes with a beginning and an ending date. So we are looking for something that's got a beginning, a middle, and an end with a specific set of outcomes expected. If you have, let's say, a weekly drop-in ukulele playing group, and there's never a beginning to that program and there's never an end, and people just drop in on Tuesday nights, it's not really a project. There's no beginning, there's no end, there's no culminating event, there's no final thing that wraps up the experience. On the other hand, if you do a semester of ukulele classes that require people to sign up, participate for the semester, and at the end of it, maybe you do a culminating concert, that's very obviously a project by our definitions. The organization investment grants. This is something brand new. And again, this is part of our response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the challenges that organizations are facing. What we're looking at here, first of all, you have to be a fully cultural 501c3 organization to be eligible for this. So my previous example of the social service organization that does a cultural program, that organization is not eligible. The municipal organizations are not eligible. This is specifically for an organization that has a cultural mission. And by cultural, we refer to arts, humanities, and interpretive sciences. And these are projects where you are building capacity for your organization to serve your mission. So a couple of the things that prompted us to think about this as a way to provide value for Massachusetts organizations: you're doing online programming for the first time and your staff has no idea how to do that. And you need to do training for your staff on how to create online programming. And you need to buy some supplies to make that possible. Maybe you need a new camera, a new computer within the budget limits that this program has. All of those are things that we would consider to be an investment in your organization that allows you to serve your mission. Perhaps you are looking to develop health protocols for welcoming your staff and the public back into your physical space. And that's going to include assessment of your space and training for your staff and signage and maybe some plexiglass. That would be an eligible project. Perhaps you're looking at DEIA training or strategic planning or other work that enables you to improve your ability to serve your mission. We really encourage you, if you're looking at an organization investment grant, we really encourage you to reach out to me to talk about it. I can give you some feedback on what you're thinking about. I can give you some advice on how you can structure that proposal so it falls in line with what we're looking at. This is not a grant that is specifically for buying equipment. So I had somebody reach out to me asking the question, we're looking to buy assistive listening devices to help audiences who are hard of hearing. Can we apply for a grant just to buy the equipment? No, this is not a capital expenditure grant. However, if you are looking at an organization investment where you are learning how to work with people who have hearing impairment, and you're looking at training your staff on appropriate communications and how your staff should be best prepared to support patrons who have hearing impairment. And as part of that work, you also think you need to purchase some headsets and other equipment for the listening system. That could be a possible organization investment. I'm going to get to one more slide about eligible projects and then pause to answer questions about eligible projects. And this is what isn't eligible. So first of all, programming outside of Massachusetts. We are the Massachusetts Cultural Council. We're supporting programming that benefits the residents of Massachusetts and the organizations of Massachusetts. In other times, we've had organizations, let's say you are a theater and you are touring a production and it's also doing some performances in New Hampshire. What we would suggest to you is that your application for this program does not include the New Hampshire project. So you only apply for support for the Massachusetts component of your organization, of your project. We don't fund fundraising activities. So if you are looking for a sponsor for your gala or fundraising support to put on your concert that is a fundraiser for your scholarship program, that's not going to be eligible. And also, as we are looking at the organization investment, we're not supporting fundraising plans or marketing plans. We're really looking at programs, at projects that are about building your staff capacity in how to do work that supports your mission. Again, we do not support capital expenditures or construction. So if you are renovating your building, this is not the grant for that program. If you have expenses, supplies expenses, those are a legitimate part of a project. So for example, again, a theatrical production where you are building sets and costumes, those expenses are legitimate. We are not putting a cash cap on how much you spend on the physical presentation of your show. However, if you're saying we need to buy a computer to do this thing, or we need to buy large fixed equipment, there is a $1,000 cap on the capital expenditures. And we'll get into that a little bit more with the budget. Once again, This is not a program where we support individual applicants. You have to be an organization. We do not support projects that are exclusively for or by students as part of the activities of a college or school. So if you are a high school and you are looking to support your high school band program, this is not the program that will support that. If you are looking to engage a teaching artist to work in your school, this is not the program for that. So there has to be a substantial portion of the program that is benefiting the general public. So maybe you are the art gallery at a university and you are going to put on an art exhibit that is open to all, and part of your outreach is to non-college audiences. That could be an eligible project. Projects by religious groups that are for the purpose of advancing religion, and our guidelines have a little more language than that, but this is really the core part of it. There are definitely churches that do concert series. A concert series put on by a church could be a legitimate project for the purposes of this grant program. But if that church concert series is also part of the religious instruction of that church, that's not going to be eligible for this. And then finally, the re-granting of our funds to third parties in the sense of prizes or scholarships is not an eligible part of the application. Now, if you have a project, let's say it's a concerto competition, and part of that is that the winner of the concerto competition gets to perform with your orchestra and also gets a cash prize. The project is eligible, but not the cash prize portion of your budget. So leave the cash prize out of the budget you submit to us. I hope that makes sense.
Hi, Sarah. This is Charles. I'm going to
Hi.
jump in because it's a small question, but I think it has a big answer, which is around website redesign and how that touches upon capital, which isn't, public programming or public service, which might be. So that's why I thought I'd put that out for a public answer.
That's a great question. In the past, we have not considered a website design to be programming in and of itself. The website exists as a vehicle to get information about the programming out, or the vehicle that I'm
Right,
thinking.
as if a project was embedded in the website
Yes.
of the video. So you'd really want to look at what you're achieving and frame the application appropriately.
Thank you, Charles. Perfectly put. Yes. So an application to redesign your website is not going to be an eligible project. Again, when we go back to that organization investment, think about it as something that actually adds skills and knowledge to your existing organization, as opposed to work that you are paying somebody else to create and provide for you. Any other questions on this? Of course, I can only hear Charles and Cheyenne, so I'm assuming that there are no other questions. So I'm going to move on to the next step, and there will be time for general questions at the end. So the criteria, and this is going to be, for anyone who has applied to this program in the past, this is going to be an enormous revision of the program. So we have a set of questions. The questions all lead to these criteria. First of all, that the project and its goals are clearly defined. Second, that the project is appropriately designed to meet those goals. Third, that the project has at least one strategy focused on promoting DEIA with a goal that is both measurable, not both, entirely, measurable, achievable, and appropriate to the project. Each of those is 20% of your application. Next, the project's budget is appropriate to the project. If you tell us that you are doing some massive project and you give us a $2,000 budget, we're going to wonder how you're doing that. Or the flip side, you're looking at doing something quite small, but your budget is $50,000. We're going to wonder about that. So appropriate to the project that you've described. We are giving some bonus to organizations that have not received a project grant before. So we are thinking very much about the need to spread resources around to organizations that might not have received something in the past. It's a 10% bonus or 10% of the score. And final,
Sarah,
yeah.
can you draw out DEIA, please?
Thank you. Beg your pardon. You know, I was just thinking earlier today that acronyms are a problem. DEIA, diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. So we are looking at strategies that extend diversity, equity, inclusion, access for your project. It does not have to meet all 4 of those, but you do have to identify one. So depending on your organization, this could be that you are trying to be more accessible to people with disabilities. And so you make sure that your project is accessible. First of all, this is a requirement of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is federal law. But having already made sure that your project has been accessible in the past, you realize you haven't gotten the word out to the appropriate audiences. So as a strategy for DEIA to reach people who have disabilities, maybe you have partnered with an organization or you're doing something very specific to be more accessible and to increase your participation. And my friend Charles could probably give a great example that this isn't coming into my head at this moment. You could be an organization that is deciding to work with veterans. Maybe your project is a writing workshop and you are going to target veterans groups. So a strategy could be, a goal could be to increase the percentage of veterans who participate to some particular number that you can determine is appropriate to your project. And your work to make that happen is going to be partnering with VA hospitals or veterans associations or other appropriate organizations to partner with. So think about what is appropriate to the organization that you are working with or the project that you are doing, and also what is reasonable and achievable, but stretch yourself a little bit. If your organization, well, the final element here is that your mission is primarily focused on people of color or other historically underrepresented and underfunded groups. And again, there's more language than that in the guidelines. This is just a bullet point on the PowerPoint. But if you go to our guidelines, you'll see more information on that. I'm thinking about an organization that is in our portfolio already, so not eligible to apply for this grant program, but the Encore Dance Troupe in Lowell, Massachusetts. Their mission is about preserving Cambodian dance forms and Cambodian culture and sharing that with the next generation. That is an organization whose mission is primarily focused on people of color, and that is clearly who they are. A strategy for them might be that they want to reach more young people, but it's also legitimate for them to point out in this category, in the question about their strategy for promoting DEIA, that they are already an organization that is defined around that as their mission, and their goal is to reach people with this work that they're doing. Questions about this criteria? Also, to throw out one more thing here, we are going to consider geographical distribution of grants. So we will be awarding grants in proportion to the number of applications that we get from various regions of the Commonwealth to make sure that we are appropriately supporting all areas of the Commonwealth. I believe we work with 6 geographic distributions. The idea here is that if, let's say, the Berkshires represent 10% of the applications, then the Berkshires will receive 10% of the grant awards. And before anyone freaks out, I just want to say we've been running the projects program since fiscal 17. And it has always surprised me when we have evaluated the results after the reviewers have scored the applications. I've always been surprised to see that each geographic region has a roughly comparable success rate. So Pioneer Valley organizations have the same success rate as Cape and Islands or Greater Boston or north of Boston. It's always worked out that way by luck. We are simply putting it into our actual guidelines as a concern for us. I'm going to say, let's see, anything else I want to point out here. I do see a question about an ongoing program. Your project does have to be completed by June 30th to be eligible for this particular grant program. So if your project doesn't finish until the next fiscal year, you should probably look at that year's application. I also see a question about the Card to Culture. If you are not an organization that is already aware of the Card to Culture, it's a wonderful program. I encourage you to visit our website and learn more about it. The Card to Culture is our partnership with another agency, actually 3 other agencies of the Massachusetts government. The EBT card is probably better known as food stamps. So food assistance for Massachusetts residents. We've partnered with the state agencies that provide that benefit, and we've fabulously partnered with cultural organizations all over the Commonwealth that then provide discounts or even free participation to folks who have an EBT card. I would say that simply having the partnership and providing a discount through the EBT program is not enough to be a strategy, because honestly, until you've actually done something to support that, it's a fairly passive strategy. And you create the partnership, you offer the discount, but you have not taken steps to make sure that that information is available. And therefore, we would question about whether or not it is measurable and achievable based on your own organization from promoting DEIA. And I'm going to get to the budget as a next step, I believe. Actually, I can talk. Yeah, I'm going to wait until the budget for the next portion when I go through the actual application. But you can include staff time as part of your eligible expenses. If you are paying people for work on this project, that is part of your budget. So what happens if you get a grant? It's a very old copy of our logo on that banner, but I love those people so much I have to keep that picture around for a while. We do expect that you will engage in and report on an advocacy activity. And what that means is if you get a grant, it's an expectation and a contract requirement that you will connect with your state legislature to advocate for the field. So this is not just for your organization, this is actually on behalf of the cultural sector. And you can do that very easily by writing to your state senator or your state representative and thanking them for their support of the Mass Cultural Council because you were able to get a grant that benefits your organization in their legislative district. So as simple as thanking them will do the job. Also, we are in the very early stages of the work on the fiscal 22 budget. So connecting with your legislators to encourage them to support the Mass Cultural Council's budget is another great way that you can fulfill this requirement. We require that you acknowledge Mass Cultural Council funding, and you can do this by putting our logo, which you see in the corner of the screen there, on your website, on printed materials, on signage, whatever is appropriate to the project that you're doing. As I mentioned before, you have to submit a final report. And then, as I've also mentioned before, you have to match this grant 1-to-1 with non-state funds. And I say non-state funds, we are being flexible about local cultural council funds because we know that many local cultural councils are awarding funds beyond what they've received from the state for running that program. So they might be receiving funds from the municipality or other private fundraising that goes on to support the grants that they award. So you can include your local cultural council funds as a part of your match. You cannot include festivals grant funds because those come very directly from Mass Cultural Council, not from another party.
Sarah?
Yeah.
There's kind of a conversation about how the funding can be used. It is, can your budget include the salary of people who work full-time at the organization? If there are two organizations partnering, how should they handle the application and the compensation?
Okay, so when we get to the actual application, I'll spend more time on the budget. But yes, you can include the time of people who are working on this project. And that's really easy when you're hiring, let's say, teaching artists specifically to run this program. But if your administrative staff is spending their time on this project as well, you can include that. So in the question about how you've planned your project, you can simply state that a piece of the budget is a portion of your administrator staff time dedicated to this project. So you should always be able to justify that if we ask you to show us the numbers after the fact. But for the purpose of the budget, there's a section for staff time. And like I said, we'll get to the budget page in a little more detail. In terms of a partnership with another organization, it's your project for the purpose of this application. You can only have one applicant for the project. We only have a contract with one applicant for the project. So this is your project, your budget. Imagine that your partner disappears and quits the project. We still have a contract with you to do this project. So this should be, what are your cash expenses for this? What is your staff time? Now, if the other organization expects that you are going to compensate them for their participation in providing that project for you, then you can put that in as an expense on your budget. And if that's recognizing that's a complicated situation and it's not a common situation, I am happy to have a longer conversation with you about your particular project and what makes it click, so we can get you to the best possible application for your project. And I should probably just, if you could put questions in the Q&A and not into the chat, we'll be more able to help support you as we go along with this. So, sorry. So this is what the application looks like. This is, any of you who have applied to local cultural councils, this is not the same application software. So the application here is at mass.gosmart.org. There are links on our website to it, or you can type that in. GoSmart is the specific platform that we are using for this application. If you have applied to the Gateway program, if you've applied to festivals, if you have applied to the Cultural Facilities Fund, if you have applied to projects in the past, then you actually have a profile already in this system. And I would encourage you, if you already have done that, not to start a new account just to apply for this one. You can put in the email, you can get a password prompt. If you really have trouble, you can shoot me an email and I can see what I can do to help you connect with an existing account. If all you have applied for in the past is a local cultural council, it's a different username, it's a different password, you will have to start a new account. When you log in, right below that Mass Cultural Council logo, you will see, after you've logged in, you will see current programs and applications as one of the options. Click on that. You're going to see every program that Mass Cultural Council currently has open and accepting applications or accepting reports. Scroll on down until you find projects for FY21. That's where you will find the questions for this particular program. I encourage you, when you log in, the first thing you should really do is click on Edit Profile. We've got a lot of organizations that have had staff turnover, new email addresses, new physical locations. Please make sure that all of our information is up to date. Then what the actual application looks like is the picture on the right-hand side of the screen. The question sits as a big block of text on the left, and then the box for you to type into is on the right. 1,500 characters for most of these questions, so we are not looking for you to write a massive novel. We're looking for really clear, direct, coherent explanation of your project. Every character counts, every space counts, every bit of punctuation counts towards that space, that character limit. A few tips for you. Proofread a PDF of your application and your organization overview before you submit it. So first of all, if you put in bolding and stuff like that, it's not going to take. And so when you run a PDF, you will find that it looks really funky. I am going to beg you to really carefully read the name of your own organization and the email address that you have used, because if you give us an incorrect email address, we don't have a way to contact you easily. It's not a scoring criteria, but it really isn't the first impression you want to make either, to have a typo in your own organization name, which, believe me, we have seen. We encourage you to actually type your text in a word processing document and then copy and paste it into the application. Couple of things there. First of all, the word processing software will be more effective at catching typos for you, and will probably have an easy editing function. And if for some terrible reason this software should not save your text, you will still have it living there in the word processing software that you drafted it in, which will make it very easy for you to recreate your application. Answer the questions completely and specifically. If a friend reads your application and doesn't know what you're doing, when you're doing it, who you're doing it for, and why you're doing it, then you probably haven't answered the question really specifically. Assume that the folks who are reading your application, doesn't know you. The people don't know you and they don't know your work. So explain that you are a historical society in a rural community. That will be useful information to them. Save your work at the bottom of each page. The saddest, most frustrating thing about the GoSmart application system is it does not automatically save your work. So if you think you've done a fabulous job, you've answered the questions with more brilliance than you ever thought possible, you have completed the budget, you close the program down, and you didn't click save, all of your work disappears. So please save your work. And again, doing your work, first of all, in the word processing software will save that for you. I'm sorry, I'm going longer than I thought I would today. This is what the application looks like. Again, the first question, provide a complete description of your proposed project, including the activities plan. Describe it in detail. Think about, what are you doing? Who's doing it? Is it online, in person, both? Who's the target audience? I know 1,500 characters doesn't sound like a lot, so get right to the point. We are doing a series of painting classes. They will be online. The target audience is senior citizens. There will be 7 sessions culminating with an exhibition, something like that. Answers all those questions. The next question, the project goals. Why are you doing it? We're doing this because senior citizens are eager for opportunities to develop skills. Success for us will be if everybody finishes the program having completed a painting for the final exhibit, and that we've also enrolled some number of people. I mean, I'm just sort of talking off the top here, but that's the kind of way you would want to answer these questions. We want to know how you designed it to meet those stated goals. So if one of your goals is that everybody finishes a painting, then how have you designed it? Well, 7 weeks, and in week 1 we work on this, and in week 2 we work on that, so that we get to the end of the program and everyone has been able to be successful in this project. A specific strategy for promoting diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. Well, in this case, the whole program is designed around specifically reaching senior citizens, and that is the target group that you'd be looking for. But you might also say that an additional strategy is reaching lower income senior citizens, and your strategy is to work with the local council on aging to get the word out, and you're going to provide not only scholarships for lower income seniors, but also a budget for painting supplies, so that the person who would find the cost of supplies to be a barrier does not have that barrier. This is what the budget page looks like. There are boxes for salaries and fees, and then there's a separate section of boxes for non-salary and fees. So we're looking, first of all, artists, humanists, scientists. The painting instructor in that last example would be there under your artists. Administrative, your staff time that was spent designing the program, marketing the program, registering people for the program. Again, staff time for folks that you're currently paying as ongoing salaried staff, eligible here. There is a set of categories that we've put in here as things that we think are common ones, but there are also blank categories for you to be more specific in relationship to your own project. So we can't imagine everything that you might spend money on. We've given you some blank spaces to figure those out for yourself. Only expenses in Massachusetts, only cash expenses, not in kind.
Sarah?
Yeah.
There are some questions about the break-even budget.
Okay.
It is correct that you can count this grant and the funds you have to match it with as revenue in the budget.
Yeah, so we're looking, I know you can't probably read it well enough, but when you actually log in and see the application, there is a line for state government projects. Enter the grant amount requested. So we expect that you will put this grant in that line. If, let's say, your project is something that you are looking to pay for with this grant and with money from your reserves, or from your general operating. That would be another category that you could create. It's a blank space, but you could put in funds from reserves, applicant cash, something like that, that tells us this is money that you already have on hand that you are allocating to this project. Or if you were selling tickets or advertising space or whatever that is specifically relevant to this project, that would also be legitimate. Does that answer the question?
Yes, I'm trying to synthesize the questions that have been asked. I think the question is, if I don't expect the project to make any money at all, how do I create a break-even budget? And I think that is the answer, is that the grant and what you have to match it with are counted as money as that you're making on the project.
Yes. Oh, yes. Okay, I understand. Yes, that would be on the revenue side. You would put this grant, and then you might be receiving donations specifically to support this, or it simply might be that you are using funds from your reserves to support this. And that's absolutely okay. The project does not have to drive its own revenue creation. But you do have to be able to tell us that you've got the funds to pay for the part that we're not paying for. I hope that helps. Let's see. So a couple of things. The application, once again, it's due March 2nd. Today is February 3rd. Send me an email, call me, voicemail. I'm not sitting in the office these days, but I will get your voicemail message. Connect with me if you have questions. I am doing 3 sessions of Zoom drop-ins, so office hours. Tuesday the 16th from 4 to 5, Friday the 19th from 10:30 to 11:30, and Tuesday the 24th, again from 4 to 5. On the same page of our website where you found the link to register for this session, there are 3 more links to register for those sessions. And that'll be a Zoom meeting where you can talk and I can talk, and we will hash through your questions and do our very best, again, to solve them, and most importantly, to help you submit the most successful application possible. I know it's a little late. It's about 10 past 5. I am perfectly willing to hang out in the chat. My colleagues might want to sign off for the day. I know there are small children who need to be fed, etc. So with that said, it looks like.
Sarah, this is Charles, and I'm going to jump in with a question that comes back really from earlier about who is eligible. We do have a question about being a for-profit entity, but with a philanthropic initiative. Can they apply for a project grant under this fiscal sponsorship, meaning they're the fiscal sponsor for a philanthropic initiative?
Not eligible. Sorry.
Thank you.
But we do appreciate that you're doing philanthropic activity. Thank you for that. Anything else?
We also have a question about, as a part of the project, hiring a contractor who lives outside of Massachusetts. Can you still pay that contractor?
Oh, that's interesting. You know what? If your project is happening in Massachusetts, then paying a contractor who is not from Massachusetts to do that project is okay. Imagine you're doing a concert series and your soloist comes from New York City. That would be a contractor outside of Massachusetts. That would be eligible.
Great. Thank you.
My goodness, you folks, thank you to Charles and to Cheyenne. I can see you've addressed so many things. I don't know if there's anything that we didn't answer.
There was a few questions about larger organizations that have several departments. And this one is specifically the fiscal agent being a 501c3. If they're sponsoring other entities as well, can all of those entities submit applications?
So what's going to happen when you see the application itself, you're going to see a section for the applicant. In the case, let's say you are the organization that also asks as a fiscal sponsor for other folks. You are the applicant for your own project. The folks that you are a fiscal sponsor for will put themselves in, their own organizations in, as the applicant. And then there's a section for them to give the details for their fiscal sponsor. So you'll only show up as the applicant on your own application. You will show up as the fiscal sponsor on the other applications. And you may be a fiscal sponsor for as many organizations as you feel like you are capable of handling. That will not be a factor in evaluating the application. It just means that you'll get a lot of contracts for other people's grants as well. Anything else? I see someone asking questions about what kinds of fundraising activities. Yeah, if you're selling things, if you're fundraising specifically for this project, that could all be for this grant. Anything else that needs to be answered now? If not, you can shoot me an email. Or like I said, I can hang out here and try to answer any questions in the Q&A that we weren't able to get to, but I do want to let my colleagues go.
I will just say this is not a question, but it was a question that several people had asked. The public programming project grants, as we know them, still exist, and the organizational investment project grants have been added to the umbrella of project grants. You can't apply for organizational investment and a public programming because there are different types of project grants.
That is correct. They both fall under this category of project grants. One of the first things you're going to see on the application is a question where you identify, is it a public programming or organizational investment? You pick which one it is, and then you answer the questions with that in mind.
This is Charles. I'm going to jump in with this last question because it slowed down a little bit.
Yeah.
Rather than typing. We have the question, is a raffle okay for fundraising?
If that's part of your fund, like your project should not be the raffle because we're not going to support your raffle. But if you're doing a raffle and the funds from that are supporting the project, absolutely okay.
Yeah, so the raffle would have to take place before the project, because then you could use the money from the raffle in your project budget.
Within the fiscal year, because it's, again, income and expenses in this fiscal year. Anything else?
There's a question about incorporation. I don't know if this was the same person before. So the question is, how does the MCC define group that isn't incorporated? How do you prove that you're a group that's not incorporated? And we also got a question earlier that was a group of people that had a fiscal sponsor, and would that qualify?
So, couple of things. I know that the Boston Dance Alliance acts as a fiscal sponsor for a couple of small dance companies. And those are dance companies, people get together, choreographer sets work on them, they do a dance program, but they have not yet incorporated. But they are functioning as an organization. I know musical groups that have a quintet, for example, that is working and doing concerts, but they have not incorporated as an entity. They've got a fiscal sponsor. We probably see about maybe 10, 12 applications a year from these. Sometimes the cultural districts that have applied don't have their own incorporation status, and one of their members is acting as the fiscal agent for the cultural district. So you also have to answer the question about, have you done 2 years of programming as this entity? And you're going to give us your website. So if you don't have that kind of information to provide for us, we will question eligibility, and I'll, track you down. No one's going to be willing to act as a fiscal agent for you if you aren't legit. Or at least no legitimate organizations can be willing to do that. Well, I can see that folks are leaving us. Again, I want to thank you for your time, and thank you for the work that you're doing, because we have meaning because what you do has meaning. So thank you for that. Call me, email me, join me for one of my Zoom office hours. I look forward to reading your applications and learning more about your work. And I'm going to say thank you and goodbye. This has been recorded. The recording will be posted online. The slides for this will also be posted on our website. So again, thank you so much for your time. I hope you have learned what you need from this. And again, I look forward to your successful applications. Good evening.